Hello, and welcome back to this edition of the Potluck Show. I'm your host, Meera Narasimhan. Today, our guest is someone who has been on this show not a couple of months ago, and of course, you can see all her background and history from that show, which will be available on www.potluck-online.org. But we are thrilled to have our latest candidate venturing into politics for the first time in Loudoun County for the Commonwealth's attorney's job. Welcome to our show, Buta Biberaj.
Thank you, Meera.
And we're thrilled to have you back.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, your roots.
My parents emigrated here to the United States back in 1967 from Montenegro, which was the former Yugoslavia. I was raised in New York. And then in 1987, we moved down to Virginia. I went to law school at George Mason and graduated in 1993. And I started a law practice in Leesburg. And my practice has been there since then. So I've been a practicing lawyer for 25 years. I've also been a substitute judge for 12 years. That is a position that has been designated for me by the judges in our courts who indicate that they had faith in my decision making and my ability to be able to have a broad practice and be able to use that knowledge and experience in the courts as a presiding judge.
So you've been a judge.
I have been.
You've been a defense attorney.
I have.
But Commonwealth's attorney is a prosecutor.
Correct.
What do you bring to that?
A prosecutor is the criminal side of what we would call like the plaintiff's position. That means that's the person who has a case that they start and they're in charge of prosecuting or pushing it forward. That's very similar to what we do in the civil arena. I've been a plaintiff's attorney for 25 years, so I've had cases that I have prosecuted from the civil aspect and pushed them forward so that they are actually from start to finish brought before the court and that we've prevailed. So the idea that it's different is not so different, and plus I'm so highly versed in the criminal arena that it's just a matter of changing the mindset of being criminal versus civil laws that I had to do. But other than that, the experience is there.
So why did you stumble into wanting to get into politics?
I really didn't want to get into politics. I never saw that as being part of my future or my endeavors. But being a practicing attorney for 25 years, I was a guardian at Loudoun for 23 years. We're protecting the elderly and children. I just saw that the system was not working as best as it could. In Loudoun County, we're very fortunate. We don't have a high level of crime. We do have crime, but we don't have a high level of crime that warrants us treating this system the way we do, where we take someone's background, such as their religion, their race, their education, socioeconomic levels, and we hold it against them. And being on that position of having defended individuals or presiding as a judge, I did not see the fairness of that, and I thought I could change it one-on-one as an attorney. And I realized once I became a judge that I thought the judge would have the ability and the power to make those impacts. That was not where the thought decision-making was. It was actually with the prosecutor's office and the amount of power that they have to decide what charges to file, who to file them against, how to proceed, how to offer plea agreements, and how to argue sentencing was going to impact our community. And I thought that it wasn't doing it in the level that was to the best interest of Loudoun County. So then I decided that I was going to make that effort to represent Loudoun County as its Commonwealth's attorney.
So from your experience, which is extensive, what is the topmost issue that bothered you being in the system, and what is it you want to do as a prosecutor?
Victim services really bothers me a lot, and that's this fact. I've defended individuals who are accused of having committed an offense against someone. And our victim services in Loudoun County are based on, while the case is pending, you get services. Once the case is over, services end. For me, as well as having a background in dealing with individuals for the 25 years, I saw that that is a time when someone is almost available to start healing, because they're not under the trauma of court, they're not under the trauma of the police case, they're not under the trauma of the situation. Now they can actually start healing, but the services were not there. I wanted to bring that to the forefront of our community so that they understood that that was very important. I had victims of cases where my clients were the ones who were the accused and they were defending against it. And what ended up happening is those people would come to me and say, okay, I saw how you did in court. How can you help me? And I realized that that is a gap that I'm being asked to fill that normally is not my role, but it is a gap that my community desired and needed. And I wanted to focus on the victims as far as that's concerned. And then
What
also
can you do for that?
is using our services, a synergy, which means basically you can't do it just throughout the Loudoun County Commonwealth Attorney's Office. But you could use law enforcement to make sure that when they're dealing with the victim on the forefront, that they're dealing with the needs of the victim more than just the crime, because the crime is important, but that's not the entirety of it. Making sure that our social services are part of it, making sure that their families are part of it, making sure that their jobs and our education system are part of it, so that we have this conglomerate of services that are supporting that person rather than just doing it independently and it be doing it deficiently.
And how are you going to handle, we all know it's a fact that the total system there's inequity in the system. How are you going to be able to deal with that? Because it seems it's stacked against the minorities, the poor, and everything that goes with that. So probably Loudoun County, being the richest in the nation, may not see everything that the other counties see, or say New York or something. But what is it you have seen from your experience, and how can you change that?
I come from a diverse background. I am an immigrant. My religion has always been one that's more recently been attacked than being Muslim. I am a woman, right? I have a situation here where what we do is, having not been born here and the education levels, those are things that have been potentially impediments to how I've been able to be successful. But those experiences have given me a different lens to be able to be empathetic to somebody's situation, so that we can look beyond that and say, what has brought this person before the courts, and how are we going to treat them? My focus is going to be based on one of opportunities for success. It's real easy to set somebody up for failure. But when somebody fails in our criminal justice system, our community fails. That means that person stays locked up longer than maybe they need to. Mm-hmm. They're not returning to the community, so they can't keep a job. They can't support their family. They can't raise their kids. So that ripple effect is detrimentally affecting our community, and bringing that diversity of experience to be able to say, okay, why are we doing this, will allow me to be able to have that opportunity to say, let's do it differently. In the office of the Commonwealth Attorney, we also don't have diversity of experience, and we don't have diversity of backgrounds. It's hard for somebody to look at you or look at your kid and think that that kid has promise if they don't see themselves or they don't see their children in that kid's face, because it's somebody else's kid. Right. So until we have that diversity to be able to say, you know what, this could be somebody that I know, this could be my nephew, this could be my son, this could be my neighbor's kid, then we don't have the ability, or we don't enact on the ability to say, let me see what I could do to help this person be successful. Held compliant, held accountable for what the actions were, but now how do we make it an opportunity for success?
And I believe Loudoun County is a pioneer in 2 different kinds of courts. How is that going?
We just recently got the mental health docket last year, okay. And we've also just recently added our drug docket in April of this year. Mm-hmm. Those are 2 great opportunities for us to start serving our community better, because what we're doing is we're now actually taking action to the knowledge that we can't incarcerate ourselves out of these problems. The opioid crisis and other drugs is not something that you can lock somebody up, then release them and think that the problem's been cured, because if we can lock people up and cure problems, we should lock everybody up.
Yes.
We just know that that's a failing of the system. The mental health docket is another one where, for mental health reasons, individuals commit offenses that they otherwise would not be committing if they were healthy. So here's an investment in the drug court, here's an investment in mental health docket to say, how do we keep people out of the system, but provide them the services so that they have an opportunity for success? If we don't address those issues, then what we're doing is we're creating a revolving door. Then our recidivism rate increases. Mm-hmm. When we have crimes or we have recidivism, repeat of crimes, what we're doing is we are re-victimizing our community. That means that we're making our citizenry subject to crimes. Prosecuting crimes is easy. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to be glib about it, but that means you have to have a victim, you have to have an investigation, you have to have a prosecution, you have to have a judge, you have to have an attorney, you have to have a jury, sentencing. So all of these services, but they come at the tail end.
Correct.
That's too late to help the victim. Because the only thing you're going to be able to provide to the victim is acknowledgement that they've been a victim, maybe an opportunity for them to say, yes, I've been harmed, but they've been made a victim. Right. If we could change that focus to the front side.
The preventive measure.
Preventive measures, that's right, because preventing crimes is a heck of a lot better than prosecuting crimes.
How can you prevent opioid crisis?
Let's start with this. Why don't we, in Loudoun County, as you indicated, we are the most affluent community, why don't we have drug court and juvenile court? This is where our drugs start. Kids are taking alcohol, they're smoking marijuana, they're smoking more significant drugs, and a lot of that really is because we are affluent. Our kids have means and access to those drugs, and they don't have the supervision that they would otherwise need. So if we work together with the school system, with the parents, with after-school programs, mentoring, law enforcement, so that when it comes before the court the first time, that we're sitting here saying, okay, let's talk to you, young man, with your parents, what is truly going on? I've been practicing for 25 years. Anytime I have a client that comes to me, my job is to do this. What is the current crisis? How did we get here? Because most of this didn't happen that same day. There's a trauma-focused aspect of where they came from. So why are they before the court or going to be before the court? How do we stabilize you in your life? And how do we create these opportunities for success so that you don't ever come back before the court? That's when the system is a success. If we are able to address the issue, have the consequences, but we end the recidivism, then our whole community is made safer, and that's what we end up doing is by involving the entirety of the community. It's not just a court system or a Commonwealth attorney problem, it is a community problem.
And lately, Loudoun County was just on the news the past 2 days about the vaping issue. That is also a kind of drug issue.
It is. Now, the benefit I would see from a law enforcement perspective is that last July, the legislature has made tobacco an item that you could consume after the age of 21, lawfully. What that does is it makes it easier at this point for schools who had the little vaping pens in the school. How do I know whether you're the right age or the wrong age? Because 16 used to be okay for you to smoke, and how do we do it? So now it's easier for the school to say, I'm going to enforce this, because you shouldn't have it because you're not at the right age. Mm-hmm. So that is the first starting there. The other thing is we have to educate families, because a lot of parents look at it because it was better than cigarettes.
True.
It's not better than cigarettes. Let's educate you. We don't know what's in this chemical, but we do know that your body is automatically absorbing it. From a medical health perspective, that never is a good idea.
True, but from a legal perspective, legal is always after the fact.
It is.
You know, the resultant, whatever happens after a law is applied and somebody breaks the law. How would you, as a Commonwealth's attorney, address this at the source?
Then what we do is just what you said. Let's go to the source. Who's selling these things? So if we go to the vendors and we work with law enforcement, we say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to come and start talking to people who are behind the counter. Who are you selling it to? Mm-hmm. When we're catching the kids with it, where did you buy it from? Who did you get it from? Because it's real easy to address the kid who, as you said, is the last piece of that problem, but you're not resolving it. That's not a solution-based approach. That really is just a consequence-based approach. We want to do is we want to go on the front side and start talking about that, start talking with companies who are, you know, doing the production of the vaping. Right now, it's not uncommon for a lot of states to sue the pharmaceuticals. Why? Because of the opiate crisis. Mm-hmm. But this has been 30 years in the making.
Right.
Why don't we now have that conversation with the pharmaceuticals now and the people who are doing it to say, look at the risk you're running.
Yes.
Because we're going to be back into this process again. We did it with tobacco, we're doing it with opiate, we're going to do it with vaping. Do you really want to be on the wrong side of law and the wrong side of business, that you're going to run that risk that you're going to be sued and maybe put out of business if you don't take care of things more appropriately and stop attracting and stop selling and stop advertising to kids, because they become the little suckers who just see it and think it's cool, and then they do it.
Well, we talked about vaping, tobacco, we talked about opioid crisis, but DUI. You were a criminal defense attorney. Why is it they always get away?
Now, this is a perception that people have, that people get away with DUIs, and that's not really the case. I will tell you this, though, especially in Loudoun County, we have a great business complex called One Loudoun. A lot of restaurants, a lot of apartments, a lot of condos, a lot of restaurants and bars. I mean, just a mix. So where before maybe somebody went to one place, drank, and then they left, now what they're doing is they're going door to door to door. So maybe whereas they previously may have drank 2 drinks, they're now drinking 6, 8, and 10.
But there are repeat offenders.
There are some repeat offenders, but let's even go to the first-time offenders. Even the first-time offenders are people who are very well educated, have very successful jobs, know better, if we use that word in quotations, but yet the decision-making is affected when you drink alcohol. Since One Loudoun has been opened up, my criminal practice, especially with DUIs, has tripled. Right? It's tripled. But people are smarter now. Guess what else you have? You have Uber and you have Lyft. Why are you getting behind a car?
Exactly.
We need to look at this from the vendors, the restaurant owners. We have to look at it from the bartenders, the servers, to say if you've had somebody who's had 3 or 4 drinks, maybe you at least have a conversation with that person saying, can I get you an Uber?
What are we waiting for? Because in the opioid crisis, we waited 30 years to go after the drug companies. Why can't we go after the vendors now?
And we can, but it changes the focus. The way the criminal justice system is set up for prosecutors is what I call attacking the low-hanging fruit. They are great numbers because you have convicted somebody, you've convicted 25 DUIs in a month. That's not really solution-based. That means we've had 25 people who've been out in the community driving under the influence.
And killed somebody, maybe.
May have killed somebody, may not have. Or you've had, as you said before, how many drove under the influence and were not caught? So we have to change the culture within our community to say this. I have to have personal responsibility as a person who goes to a restaurant or bar. I have to set my own limits. Or I have to set my own pre-plan, which is if I'm going out, I'm going to have my Lyft or my Uber set up. You're my companion. You also have a responsibility to me to make sure that if you see that I'm drinking and my speech is slurred or there's something odd about me, you have to encourage me not to drive. I have to have that same responsibility to you. And then it goes to the servers and it goes to the businesses, law enforcement, and everybody else. Because if we don't treat this as a community, then we are going to get to the point where somebody's going to be seriously hurt and somebody's going to want to sue that restaurant. The fear of litigation, the fear of suing somebody is a real fear. Because there is great harm when somebody gets behind the wheel, driving under the influence and hurts somebody.
Would you support then car companies are thinking of, but unless counties support them, they may not introduce this, the self-testing of alcohol?
I don't know if I would recommend or not recommend something that it be
So the car
installed
doesn't
for all
move.
cars is what you're saying. I know that my understanding is, having read this, that there are car companies who are trying to make it an option for all cars. So that goes back to your self-responsibility.
Correct.
That is the wisest thing you can do, because that machine may cost you, and I know for people who are convicted of DUI, it costs them $75 to monitor. That's the best $75 you'll ever spend, because if you get caught, you got $5,000 to $10,000 in attorney fees. You have court costs and fines that go up to $2,500. You may have lost your job, which is hundreds of thousands. You may have lost your family. So those are the real significant costs. And that's on top of the fact that you may have to live with that you hurt or killed somebody. That one is priceless. And you can never come back from that.
True. And now switching gears. I'm sure you've heard about what San Francisco did. They just passed a resolution declaring the NRA as a terrorist organization. Your thoughts?
I can't really speak to that as far as categorizing as a terroristic group.
We are headquarters, So
We do up in Fairfax. We exactly do that. But how I would apply it to Loudoun County is as follows. Within the last year and a half, we had our individuals where we have developed communities. These are single-family homes with kids. Adjacent to that, we had wooded areas where people who own their property were rightfully using it for target practice, shooting. Nothing illegal about that. However, they at points had their bullets shooting into and hitting homes. Our prosecutor's office did not prosecute. Our sheriff's office did not charge. That to me is a problem. I don't have a problem with gun rights. If you are safe, you can, and lawful, you are able to have a gun. You're able to use it. When you're being unsafe or you're being reckless, then the conversation has to be that you don't have that right, and that right gets to be limited on levels that you have to make sure that we are protecting our community members. We should not be waiting for somebody to wake up one morning and their kid is in bed and they're dead because they've been shot inadvertently, unintentionally. So it was not intentional that somebody wanted to harm them, but because their recklessness that they actually were harmed. So we have to have that community approach to it to say, you can't have, it's not a Second Amendment right to use a gun inappropriately, unsafely. That's not what the Second Amendment protects.
What about background checks?
Background checks, I think, are a good thing because of this reason. Not everybody should own a gun.
Okay.
How else are we going to deal with it on the front side? Again, we'd be waiting for the tail end to have a solution. Put it on the front side. I think based on statistics, it was like 80% of the general U.S. public supports a gun background check. Why would we not do that other than for politics? So we don't do the politics as far as should we not, but we have to have the conversation is what will it ensure? If it ensures our safety, then we should be employing that.
Well, the last massacre that occurred in Texas, the background check against that individual, because of that, he was prevented from having any arms. He bought from a private seller. So how are you going to implement background checks when they can still get through the system?
Now, with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, we don't have the authority to implement the background checks. And we don't have the authority to be able to fill that gap, but our legislature does. So it's a matter of us as prosecutors, us as voting citizens, us as people, going to our legislature and saying, this is something that we need, and if you as a legislature are not going to do it, come November 5th, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to check a different box. You're not going to be in office. That's how we get people in the legislature to change their positions, where we make it a disincentive for them to think that they're going to continue to represent us if they do not represent us.
But if the federal government doesn't enforce or bring about this change, the states can. If the state cannot Loudoun County do something like this? Because you represent Loudoun County.
Right, but I represent the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, so that responsibility is going to fall on our Board of Supervisors who create ordinances. Right?
So you as a Commonwealth Attorney cannot do anything to advance that?
I do not enact laws, but in that position I would have influence upon those who can. So by that position, we do not enact laws, we enforce the laws.
We believe in the Second Amendment,
yes.
The right to bear arms. Does that mean any arms?
No.
A bazooka, AK-47s?
And what you're doing is you're hitting the extreme ones, which is the right question. At what level, at what point is it just too much? 4th of July, people have fireworks. Fireworks that are blown in your own house, that go up in the air, are made illegal. Why? Because they're excessive. Why don't we have the same thing with firearms? It's excessive. You don't need an AK-47 that could shoot off hundreds of rounds in less than a minute to do what? For hunting? Nobody hunts like that. So those are things that we have to figure out as a society. When is enough enough? Should you have the ability to have a handgun, 6 bullets in it? That's going to depend on your comfort level, your training, and what you need it for. But as far as having all those excessive amounts, that's not anything that has any common sense to it.
So you think it's better the businesses come up with their own resolution, like Walmart and other big name companies have requested patrons to not come in with their open carry?
Now,
is that the only solution?
It's not the only solution. That's the best solution. Because if you as a business are affected financially, you're not waiting for the legislature to tell you what you should or should not do. And you're letting me, the consumer, say to you, I'm not going to come into your store, or I'm not going to use your business, I'm not going to give you my money until you make those changes. So as a society, we have a greater power that if we choose to use it to make those changes rather than just the legislature. The legislature is very necessary because they make it a law, so it's very enforceable. The things that the businesses are doing, that's elective. They could choose this year to do it, and next year they could change it. So they could do the flip-flop, but that is actually the best way to do it is when your community speaks loudly and says, no more.
Why can't we shift, like in the opioid crisis, going after drug companies? Why can we not shift the onus of this to the dealers? If somebody is ordering an inordinate amount of ammunition, why is the onus or the responsibility not shifted for them to just trigger the system?
I think Hillary Clinton had tried to pass that several years ago, as far as that was a proposed legislation that she indicated would be something she would try to do, and you had a lot of those businesses just go crazy against it. And when they're doing that, that means that they're going to put money behind that so the legislature never takes place. You have to have the law that says that that person can be held accountable for somebody to enforce the law. So by itself, until somebody from the legislature determines that we need to do this, to hold them accountable, there's no financial incentive for these businesses to not sell it because it's a great moneymaker.
So basically, it's a volcano waiting to erupt again and again. And then there's thoughts and prayers. And then we go back to what has become of us as a society?
The hardest part is with our thoughts and prayers. Those are fine, but they're not solution-based. No. So we all have thoughts and prayers, and we all hope that it never repeats. And next week you turn the TV on, and there's another one. Next week there's another one. Next week there's another one. And people, what I'm more afraid of is that people become desensitized. We should not be desensitized because of the frequency. We need to be activated to say this is not going to be permitted, to allow it to happen, because every community is at risk.
So do you believe we have domestic terrorism?
Yes, we do. We had a situation in Loudoun County where we had the KKK send out leaflet flyers to members of our community, and again, becoming very intimidating to our African American community and our minority community. And yet again, law enforcement didn't do anything, and the prosecutor's office didn't do anything. So when you don't do anything, silence is never the right answer.
What could they have done?
They could have charged either with littering, they could have charged with trespassing because they're coming on the property of others, so they're not major offenses, But what they are is a message saying this is not allowed in our community. We are not going to allow you to do that without some consequence.
So they identified the perps in that case, but didn't do anything.
They didn't go far enough to identify the perps. Why are you not doing a fingerprint analysis on that document? Why are you not doing something to be able to chase it, or at least coming out publicly and saying this is unlawful? And when we catch you, because it's always a matter of time, when we catch you, we are going to prosecute you.
So is that lack of diversity in Loudoun that's causing it?
It is a huge lack of diversity because nobody can feel the pain of somebody else who might be that target. And when that happens, then I don't have the same lens, because our prosecutor came out and he said, we don't want to highlight this, because then what it does is it gives them the attention that they want. Yet again, silence is never the answer.
Yes, this is wonderful, and I think we'll continue to talk. I hope you enjoyed this segment of our discussion with our future Commonwealth's attorney from Loudoun County. And we'll have part 2 of this show. I'm your host, Meera Narasimhan, and you can, of course, catch our past interview with Buta Biberaj. Oh, I hope I got that right. I'm sorry. It's www.potluck-online.org. And we are going to continue this conversation, which is very interesting, and several other issues in part 2 of our interview, which will air subsequently after this one airs. I'm your host, Meera Narasimhan, and I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you again on the next part.